Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where you could get rich just by cutting up a frozen pond. You're not in a business school lecture. You're in a muddy pair of boots, knee-deep in 1805 New England slush, staring at a giant block of ice and thinking, yep, I'm gonna ship this to the Caribbean and make a fortune. Spoiler alert, you might not survive day one. Frostbite, bankruptcy, and colonial bureaucracy are just the start. But hey, who needs comfort when you've got vision, right? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, what city are you in and what time is it right now? I want to know who else is wandering the night with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's July, but you're wrapped in layers, sleeves rolled down to the wrists. You stand at the edge of a pond outside Boston, and everything smells like pine, horses, and sharp, clean winter. You're Frederic Tudor, 22. Not yet the Ice King. Not yet the guy Harvard MBAs will bicker about during case study debates. You've just had a wild idea. What if you could sell ice to people who've never even seen ice? And not metaphorically. You mean actual, physical ice. Frozen water, shipped thousands of miles across oceans and the equator to sun-scorched islands where the only cold thing is maybe someone's heart. Everyone thinks you've lost your mind. Your brother literally says, "No joke, Fred, this is the dumbest idea you've ever had." Your friends laugh. Your banker doesn't even laugh. He just slams the ledger shut. But you're not deterred. Because you've been to the Caribbean. You've sweated through those nights. You've seen wealthy merchants sip room temperature wine and wish for something better. You smelled opportunity. Okay, and probably rum. So you invest everything you have. You buy a ship, the favorite, load it with cut ice from local ponds packed with hay for insulation. It's 1806. You're feeling like Elon Musk with a side hustle in snowflakes. And then everything melts. By the time your shipment reaches Martinique, the ice is practically soup. There's barely anything to unload. The locals look at you like you're trying to sell them unicorn meat. One official allegedly says, "We'll buy it," just to see what this nonsense is. It's humiliating, financially ruinous. You lose thousands, but, and this is where you're either a fool or a genius, you don't quit. You study what went wrong. You realize the issue isn't the idea, it's the tech stack. You need better insulation, a faster route, maybe less hay and more engineering. Here's a weird modern echo. Some folks say you were the first person to create demand where none existed, like Apple launching the iPad, or Red Bull convincing people that canned battery acid guzzle energy. You write in your journal, "My scheme is a noble one, and if properly prosecuted, cannot fail of success." You have no customers, no cash flow, no repeat clients, but hey, you've got vibes. Historians still argue whether this first voyage was entrepreneurial courage or straight-up delusion. Business schools break into full debates on whether market invention can actually be taught, or if it only happens when someone's weird enough to just do it. You get back up, you find another ship, you borrow more money. Your family's like, "Fred, please stop." And you're like, "Guys, this is gonna work." And you do what all great entrepreneurs do when no one believes in them. You double down. No refrigeration, no logistics playbook, just you, a stack of ice, and a dream as fragile and slippery as the thing you were trying to sell. You're back in Boston, licking your wounds and trying not to notice how much interest your debts are racking up. The townsfolk are still whispering about that ice guy who shipped winter to the tropics. Your friends are politely avoiding you at the market. Even your horse looks at you funny. But this time, you're not just chasing a wild dream. You're making a plan. It's 1807, and the Caribbean still doesn't have refrigeration, obviously. But you've realized something crucial. Ice is only valuable if it survives the journey. Which means you need to become as obsessed with physics as you are with profits. You start testing insulation like a mad scientist with no lab. Hay work, okay-ish, but it's bulky and messy. So you switch to sawdust, yes, literal wood shavings. It sounds absurd, but it turns out sawdust traps cold surprisingly well and doesn't turn to mush in high humidity. Who knew the leftovers from a lumber mill would be your best co-founder? You also shorten your shipping time by negotiating with captains for faster passage, even if it means paying more. Every day at sea is a race against the sun. Your goal isn't just to deliver ice, it's to deliver usable ice. On your next trip to Havana, you finally crack it. The ice arrives with minimal melting. Not perfect, but not soup either. The Cuban upper class, hot, rich, and chronically bored, starts to take notice. One wealthy merchant offers to buy an entire shipment just for his daughter's wedding. They've never seen anything like it. Transparent, cold, and clinking in a glass of rum like some kind of witchcraft. It's not just a novelty, it's a status symbol. Suddenly, being able to serve your guests chilled drinks becomes the difference between being wealthy and being truly refined. This is your in. You're not selling ice. You're selling luxury, prestige, the illusion of control over nature itself. And buddy, it works. Meanwhile, back in the US, investors are starting to look at you differently. Not like a joke, but like a guy who maybe, just maybe, is onto something big. You rent ice houses in Jamaica, build insulated storage near the docks in New Orleans. Slowly, painstakingly, a supply chain starts to form. Ships, warehouses, mule carts, all timed down to the day. It's a mess, but it's your mess. And yet, even as things pick up, there are moments you could scream. Shipments sometimes still melt in sudden heat waves. Local officials demand bribes. Competitors pop up overnight trying to imitate you with knockoff ice that doesn't even last long enough to be served. There's one infamous cargo, 400 tons of ice, sent to Charleston. A heat surge hits the coast just before arrival. Half the cargo is gone. You're back in debt again. And you wonder, for real this time, if you're actually cursed. Here's where it gets spicy. Modern historians still debate whether your persistence was courage or compulsion. Some say you suffered from what we'd now call sunk cost fallacy. You'd invested too much to walk away. But let's be honest, isn't that half of entrepreneurship? You don't get to be the ice king without cracking a few cargo holds. You double-check your calculations. You renegotiate better shipping terms. You stop trusting anyone who says, "Don't worry, it'll be fine." And you write in your letters, sometimes to yourself, this mantra: there is no failure in perseverance, only in retreat. Weird side note? That same year, a guy in Vermont tried to patent the idea of artificial refrigeration using sulfuric acid. It didn't go anywhere, but it means the tech was creeping up behind you. You just didn't know it yet. It's a snowy morning in Massachusetts, and your boots crunch across the edge of Fresh Pond. The air is so cold it bites your cheeks, and your breath comes out in thick white clouds. This time, though, you're not alone. Beside you is Nathaniel Wyeth, a tinkerer, a woodworker, and possibly the most important person in your story who never gets his own Wikipedia page. He's the guy who's about to help you take your chaos and turn it into a machine. See, you've been cutting ice with teams of men, axes, and blind guesswork. It's grueling, messy, and wasteful. Sometimes up to 2/3 of what you cut melts before it even reaches the ship. But Wyeth? He shows up with this odd wooden contraption, rails, markers, a horse-drawn cutter that scores the ice in perfect, grid-like rectangles. You watch as the blades glide across the frozen lake like an X-acto knife on a blueprint. No guesswork, no jagged chunks, just smooth, stackable bricks of winter. Game changer. Now, with standardized blocks, you can pack tighter, you can load faster, you can build double-height ice houses and layer sawdust in between with ruthless precision. Suddenly, you're not just an ice seller, you're running an operation. And here's the kicker. The ice actually arrives colder now. The insulation works better when the blocks are uniform. Less air, fewer gaps, more science. Logistics nerds today would call it thermal mass efficiency. Back then, you just call it not melting. You and Wyeth don't always get along. He's grumpy, you're intense, but you both understand this one truth. If the business is going to grow, it has to be more than a hustle. It needs repeatability, systems, scalable precision, and you scale it. You lease more ponds. Train entire crews in Wyeth's method. Word spreads that Tudor ice is cleaner, colder, more reliable. By the late 1810s, your ice is in bars from Havana to Savannah. Even US Navy ships start buying it for long voyages, because nothing boosts morale like cold lemonade when you're stuck in the doldrums of the Atlantic. Meanwhile, a weird little footnote unfolds back in Boston. A group of well-to-do ladies starts using your ice in a totally unintended way. They put it in bowls of milk to keep it from spoiling overnight. Technically illegal under some health codes at the time, because, milk wasn't supposed to exist after sundown, but they don't care. And that accidental domestic use, it quietly foreshadows the birth of the home icebox. But let's not jump too far ahead. Right now, you're still wrestling with expansion. Every new ice house you build means new legal headaches. Who owns the water? Who gets to fish in the pond during off-season? One guy sues you for stealing the cold. No, really. That happened. And here's the part that makes modern MBAs shake their heads. You still don't have a trademark. People start copying you badly. One outfit sells Arctic ice that smells like pond scum. Another guy in Rhode Island ships saltwater ice. It melts faster and tastes like a dock. Customers complain. You write polite and then not so polite letters. You consider suing but then decide something radical. You just build a better reputation. By 1820, Tudor ice is becoming a name. Not just a product, a promise. Business historians still argue. Was it your logistics, your marketing, or just Wyeth's math skills? Some say you created the first American cold chain distribution system before anyone even called it that. Others think you were just the lucky first mover. But you? You're too busy loading another boat bound for Havana to care. You stand on the dock, pockets full of sawdust, and smile as the crew lowers crates of your perfectly cut blocks into the hold. They glisten like gemstones, like a fortune, like proof. You step off the gangplank in Havana, and it hits you. The wall of heat, the smells of rum, roasted pork, horses, and hot earth. But this time, you're not here to sweat and gamble your savings on melting dreams. You're here to deliver delight. It's the 1820s, and the moment your crates are unpacked and the first glistening cubes clink into glasses of rum and lime, something changes in the air. Literally. People gasp. Imagine it. A sugar baron lifts a sweating glass to his lips, takes a sip of a drink that's actually cold, and then looks at you like you've just handed him the moon. Ice becomes an instant fascination. Not just a novelty, an aspiration. You didn't just ship a product, you shipped status. From that moment, chilled drinks in the Caribbean stop being a rich man's curiosity and start becoming a social currency. To serve your guests, ice isn't just good hospitality, it's proof you're modern. Sophisticated, connected, You start noticing something peculiar. People don't even ask about the price anymore. They just ask, is it real Tudor ice? That's when you realize you're not just running a logistics company. You're building a brand. You've turned frozen pond water into lifestyle marketing a century before anyone had Instagram. Your Havana contacts introduce you to a network of hot climate cities desperate for an edge. You sail to New Orleans, where bar owners are nearly in tears thanking you. Then Jamaica, then Charleston. And with each new city, you set up partnerships. Ice houses near docks, agents who collect payment, mule drivers who carry the boxes into fancy hotels and private villas. But not everyone's cheering. Some of your critics start whispering about spoiling the market. They say ice is an indulgence, not a necessity, that you're distracting merchants from real commerce, like sugar and cotton. And this part is rich. One church official even suggests that chilling one's wine is unnatural and prideful. You write none of this down. Instead, you double your shipping capacity. You rent out new ships. You buy up rights to more ponds back in New England. Your men cut ice at night under lantern light, layer by layer, while you negotiate letters of credit with banks who finally stop rolling their eyes at you. And because you're you take another risk. You start offering credit to trusted clients. No cash up front, just a promise to pay when the drinks are cold and the parties are over. Your accountant nearly faints, but it works. Your Havana distributor, Enrique, becomes your number one client. He throws entire balls themed around the miracle of ice. People come just to hear it crack in their cocktails. This is where your influence quietly begins transforming hospitality forever. Bartenders, many of whom have never worked with ice before, begin inventing new ways to use it. They shake it with fruit, they float it in champagne. One guy mixes mint and lime, calls it refresco con hielo, and insists it clears the soul. We don't know his name, but some argue that's the distant ancestor of the mojito. See, it's not just that you made ice popular, it's that you introduced a new expectation into the culture of comfort. Drinks should be cold, refreshment should be immediate, and if you're rich, you deserve to feel rich, right down to the condensation on your fingertips. And sure, not everyone agrees. Even today, marketing professors debate, was it the taste that sold people or the idea of being better than the person drinking warm cider? Either way, the effect is the same. Your name is whispered at port bars and governors' mansions alike. You've gone from that nut who shipped snow to Señor Hielo, the man who brought cool to the colonies. You watch a man raise his glass of iced rum punch to the sky, sunlight gleaming through the cubes, and you think, this is the sound of a business chilling into place. It's a fine day to be broke. Again. You're back in Boston, standing outside the office of yet another banker, hands raw from cold and pride worn thin. Despite the recent Havana success, your finances are a war zone. Broken contracts, late payments, ship repairs, dock fees, and oh yes, the small matter of you having gone bankrupt. Twice. So far. Most men would hang up their ice hooks and call it a lesson. But you're Frederic Tudor. And when life hands you frozen losses, you reinvest them in colder dreams. Your idea is sound. People want ice. They're starting to expect ice. It's just that the timing, capital, and ocean currents keep conspiring against you. So you try something bold. Credit. You convince your suppliers to wait. Your shipbuilders. Your warehouse guys. Even the sawdust merchants. You explain in painful detail how each link in the chain will eventually get paid. Just not today. And miraculously, they agree. Part of it is charm. Part is sheer force of will. And part is that you've now got just enough reputation to be considered more than just a lunatic with an axe. and a frozen dream. You also start drafting tighter contracts. No more loose agreements. Everyone signs in ink, and you get lawyers to enforce penalties if folks back out. It's the most boring but essential part of your transformation from entrepreneur to operator. Here's where the story veers into something oddly modern. You build a kind of subscription model. Yes. In 1821, you offer repeat customers a guaranteed supply of ice during the hot season for a pre-negotiated rate. Pay monthly. Get your cold drinks, predictable deliveries, no hassle. Is it DoorDash for ice? Kinda. But here's the twist. People sign up happily. Because once you've had chilled lemonade in a Charleston summer, there's no going back. You've set the bar for comfort, and people will pay to keep it there. Business professors now use this as an example of how recurring revenue can stabilize even a volatile product. And investors, they finally stop laughing. But this isn't a clean comeback arc. Oh no. In 1825, disaster strikes. A major shipment to Cuba is delayed by storms. When it finally arrives, a port fire damages the cargo, and local officials hold up payment pending evaluation. That means no money. And the worst part? You'd already used that expected income as collateral for a loan. It's a domino collapse, again. You declare bankruptcy for the third time. That's the part business books sometimes gloss over. The fact that even with a brilliant model, cash flow kills. Always has, always will. Some Harvard economists still debate whether your entire early empire was one big lesson in over-leverage. How much risk is too much is basically tattooed on your ledger books by this point. But you refuse to be buried. You negotiate your way out, again. You convince the Boston elite to back you just once more, with a promise that this time, the infrastructure is solid. You show them the spreadsheets, the client list, the ports, the system, and somehow, whether from pity or awe, they buy it. They say third time's the charm. In your case, it's the fourth. By the late 1820s, the debts are cleared, the contracts are stable, and your operation? It's no longer a gamble. It's a business, a real one. And while some might still scoff, others whisper a different title now when you pass through the harbor. Not the fool who sells ice, but the Ice King of Boston. The morning sun slices across the docks like a blade, and the sawdust in the air smells faintly sweet and smoky. You wipe your hands on your coat and squint toward the harbor. Another ship, another departure. But this one's different. It's 1833, and you're not just shipping ice to the usual suspects in the Caribbean anymore. You're building infrastructure. Not a side hustle, not a lucky route. A network. You've realized that to keep ice viable and profitable, you can't just sell it. You have to store it. Enter the Tudor Ice House. Simple wooden structures, insulated with sawdust and built with thick walls. They dot the southern U.S. coastline like little frozen temples. Savannah, Mobile, Galveston, Havana. You even set up one in Nassau with a dock that practically hugs the waves. Each one holds thousands of tons of cut and packed New England ice, waiting patiently for bartenders, hotel owners, and thirsty aristocrats to come calling. And the best part? When everyone else is scrambling to keep up with seasonal supply, you've already got reserves just sitting pretty. It's like Amazon fulfillment centers. If everything inside melted on a hot day. Here's where it gets almost beautiful. Your empire isn't built on dominance, but on timing. You coordinate ice harvesting during deep winter in Massachusetts. You ship during late winter and early spring, when the seas are a little calmer and the markets below the Mason-Dixon line begin to swelter. Your ice houses open like clockwork, synchronize with the seasons. This isn't chaos anymore, it's choreography. Business historians still argue about this phase of your career. Was it supply chain genius or just incredibly lucky geography? Either way, it worked. Meanwhile, your rivals are still trying to catch up. A few copycats open their own export companies, hauling ice from Maine or upstate New York. But their storage is bad. Their timing is worse. They miss seasons, overcommit shipments, or show up with half-melted slush. You don't even sweat them. You just build another ice house. There's a famous story, might be apocryphal, about a competitor in Charleston trying to undercut your price by 20%. He announces it loudly in the town square, promises better deals, and even mocks your Boston Yankee arrogance. 2 weeks later, his shipment shows up in cubes the size of pebbles. Yours? Still brick solid. The customer sends back a letter. We'll pay for Tudor. We'd rather sip than guess. But your expansion isn't all smooth sailing. In some southern ports, your ice houses run into pushback. Local merchants claim you're disrupting local climate economics. Translation, you're making their warm ale look bad. In others, dock unions bristle at your standardized unloading crews. You end up hiring local middlemen just to keep things civil. It's exhausting, but you do it. Because this isn't just about delivering frozen water anymore. It's about establishing trust globally. By 1835, you're shipping hundreds of tons a week. You start issuing branded crates, big, blocky wooden boxes marked Tudor Ice, so customers know they're getting the real thing. Some of those crates get reused in shops, turned into planters, even converted into furniture. And guess what? That accidentally becomes the first instance of brand reinforcement via packaging. Yeah. Tudor ice crates. Literal legacy furniture. Today, branding experts still reference you. Before Coca-Cola painted a sign or Apple printed a logo, Tudor stamped a box. And yet, you still walk the docks, still check the sawdust levels, still crouch beside a stack of fresh blocks and knock on one, listening for that solid, clear ring like a frozen bell. This isn't just logistics anymore. It's a language. Cold, shipped with care, stored with precision, and always ready to serve. It's 1834, and you're staring at a globe. Not just figuratively, an actual, polished, mahogany-mounted globe in your study, slowly spinning under your fingers. You've conquered the Caribbean. The American South is locked in. Boston ponds are harvested like clockwork, but now your eyes drift across the Atlantic to India, and a tiny idea, so wild, so logistically deranged, that it gives even you pause. What if you could ship ice to Calcutta? To most people, this would be the moment to call it a night and go sip something warm. But not you. You start doing the math. Boston to Calcutta. Over 16,000 nautical miles. 2 oceans. No Panama Canal. A 4-month journey if the weather behaves, and it never does. People say you've finally snapped. They start using your name in the same sentence as lunatic. Your insurance broker tries to fake laryngitis to avoid your calls. But here's the thing, you know something they don't. You know that British colonial elites in India are suffocating. Baking in 40 degrees C summers, wrapped in 3-piece suits and Victorian etiquette, while dreaming of the cool English countryside. If anyone would pay for ice, it's them. So you plan what will become the boldest supply chain experiment in American business history. You load the ship Tuscany with 180 tons of your cleanest, coldest ice. You line the hold with sawdust so thick it looks like a forest exploded. You double reinforce the crates. You say a little prayer to Neptune, and then off she sails. For 105 days you don't sleep. You imagine every disaster, tropical storms, hull leaks, pirates, stowaway cats with a taste for sawdust. Every day, you wait for news. And then one morning, it arrives. The Tuscany made it. 100 tons of ice survived the voyage. That's more than half, an absolute miracle given the distance. And when it's unloaded into Calcutta, the British there lose their minds. Newspapers call it the frozen wonder. They write poems, they throw balls, they chill champagne on porches where the thermometer reads 102 degrees. You've just turned ice into an international luxury. A colonial officer writes, "Never have I felt so civilized." One historian would later joke, Tudor didn't export ice, he exported climate envy. The success of the Calcutta shipment instantly boosts your legend. You set up regular routes, even convince the East India Company to partner on warehouse space. You build ice houses in Bombay and Madras. Locals begin referring to you as Barf Ka Raja, the Ice King. But as usual, it's not all smooth sailing. The profits? Not nearly as high as you hoped. Between shipping, insulation, bribes, and the sheer cost of doing business halfway around the planet, your margins are as thin as the melting layer at the bottom of every crate. Business academics still argue about this. Some say you proved that demand can justify any distance, while others believe this was the moment your empire stopped growing smart and started growing big. But you don't regret it, because for once, it's not just about the money. It's about proving the world can be connected by cold, that the heat of the tropics doesn't have to rule every detail of life. And in the middle of all this, while your ice quietly reshapes the habits of people halfway across the globe, an even weirder thing starts happening. Local demand increases. People in India don't just want ice now, they want it year-round. They want it for their children, for medicine, for fish storage, for weddings. You didn't just introduce a product, you introduced an expectation, and there's no going back from that. It's a sultry evening in Bombay. The ceiling fans are groaning, the air is thick like syrup, and you are sitting at a ballroom table, watching a champagne flute drip with condensation. Across the floor, women in lace gloves and silk gowns are sipping iced punch and laughing like the heat doesn't exist. Men in military dress are clinking tumblers of whiskey cooled to a misty chill. And all around the room, no one can stop talking about it. The ice. You've created more than refreshment. You've created spectacle. In British India, nothing screams status louder than defying the local climate. You didn't just sell frozen water, you sold the illusion of power over nature. At parties, hostesses flaunt ice as if it were imported gold. They float rose petals in chilled bowls. They press cold napkins to flushed foreheads. One eccentric Raja even throws a banquet with tiny ice swans on each guest's plate. Yes, swans, made of ice. And you're eating it up. Because you've realized something. When you give people luxury, they will invent new ways to use it. Ways you never dreamed of. Now, the shipping manifests don't just say ice. They say 10 crates, medical usage, 4 crates, champagne chiller, 2 crates for cooling tiger meat. Don't ask. Even more impressive? You've taught colonial elites that if they don't serve ice, they're behind. And as that bar of expectations rises, so do your profits. Barely. Because here's the truth. Keeping a frozen empire afloat is absurdly expensive. Maintaining ice houses in tropical cities means fighting off mold, insects, theft, even monkeys. One broke into the Bombay depot and sat in the sawdust for 3 hours. You weren't mad, you were impressed. You have to hire local crews, train them on delicate handling, and pay them well enough not to just sell the ice out the back door. It's a constant juggling act. Meanwhile, the shipping routes remain your Achilles heel. Each voyage is a coin toss. Storms, pirates, port taxes, or just plain heat waves that erase weeks of cargo overnight. Modern economists love to debate this part of your legacy. Some say you perfected vertical integration, controlling harvesting, shipping, storage, and distribution before anyone else even had a word for it. Others say your empire was a sandcastle, destined to melt the moment better technology came along. But here's the contradiction. Even as margins thin, demand keeps growing. And not just from the British. Wealthy local families begin buying your ice. Some use it in cooking. Others, get this, start experimenting with primitive kulfi that stays colder, slower, longer. The result? A bizarre collision of American ice and Indian dessert. No one writes that part in the textbooks, but it happened. And you? You're keeping score in a ledger that now spans oceans. The Calcutta office sends daily updates. The Bombay agent reports your shipments are now expected before every major holiday. And in Madras, you're the subject of a literal poem. It ends. Cold as moonlight on the bay, Tudor's magic comes our way. Okay, it's not Shakespeare, but hey, it rhymed. Still, even in the glow of colonial candlelight and clinking crystal, you start to feel something shift. Not in your business, exactly. In the air. There are whispers of machines, of chemical refrigerants, of factories that might make ice without winter. You ignore it. For now. Because in this moment, you've done something few people in the 1800s could ever claim. You've changed how an entire class of people thinks about temperature. And that whether or not you keep your monopoly is legacy carved in frost. You wake up in a London boarding house in 1844 to the sound of horses clattering down a rain-slicked street and the sharp thump of that morning's Times hitting the floor outside your door. You're not in London for tea or sightseeing. You're here because someone has been stealing your thunder. Words reached you across the Atlantic. Wenham Lake ice is the new darling of British aristocracy. Wenham? That quiet pond back in Massachusetts you've walked past 100 times? Apparently, some clever upstarts have turned it into a brand. One that's making waves from Piccadilly to Parliament. They've set up shop in the West End, displaying perfect, crystal clear blocks of ice in storefront windows like diamonds. People stop and stare. Ladies press their gloved hands to the glass. Men in stovepipe hats stroke their beards in quiet admiration. And above the glistening cubes, a sign reads, "Ice from Wenham Lake. So pure, it needs no filtering." Ouch. Because you've been selling ice for decades and never once thought to make it fashionable. Your product is better, sure, more reliable. Your routes are ironed out like a sailor's best whites. But this is marketing sorcery. The Wenham Lake Company plays every psychological note perfectly. They emphasize purity, source location, transparency. Their slogan might as well be, "Our ice is cleaner than your soul." You grit your teeth reading the reviews. The Times calls it a marvel of cleanliness. The Illustrated London News gushes, "It sparkles like truth itself." Okay, calm down. But here's the kicker, they're not even cutting new ice fields. They're just buying from the same general area you do, slapping a fancy label on it, and selling it for more. You're furious and impressed. See, up to this point, your brand has been built on logistics, not luxury. You've delivered on time, across oceans, to places where a single ice cube feels like divine intervention. But now you're realizing something uncomfortable. You've been playing the wrong game. Wenham isn't selling ice. They're selling trust. They've cracked the code on what branding folks today call origin storytelling. Make it sound pure, exotic, poetic. People will pay double just to feel like they're drinking something from somewhere. It's the same psychology that puts Icelandic spring water in plastic bottles today and sells it for $6. Back then, you didn't have social media, but you did have pamphlets and newspapers, and Wenham used them with lethal precision. They published public endorsements from doctors. They claimed their ice was healthier, cleaner, fit for queens. Never mind that you used the same sawdust, the same ponds, sometimes the same boats. They'd won the narrative. And you? You start to adapt. You rush to improve your packaging. You brand your crates with clearer labels. You work with agents in Liverpool to offer demonstrations of your own, cracking fresh Tudor ice in front of curious crowds. You even consider offering tasting samples. Yes, of frozen water. Because now, presentation matters as much as preservation. There's a particular Wenham stunt that drives you up the wall. They chill a bottle of wine in the window during a heat wave. A reporter calls it a marvel of the mechanical age. Your reaction is less poetic. Still, even now, you have to admit, this rivalry pushes you. You improve your supply routes, you rethink pricing, you refine your story, begin calling your operation the Tudor Company in certain circles, just to remind folks there's an actual man behind the empire. And yet, long after the crates are unpacked and the cocktail glasses are drained, you lie awake wondering, would they still pick your ice if it didn't come with a story? You're sitting in your Boston office, the gaslight flickering against a rolled-up shipping map, when a knock taps lightly on the wood. "Mr. Tudor," your assistant says, eyes uncertain. "There's a gentleman here with a machine." You arch an eyebrow. Machines are nothing new. You've spent your life making cold happen with horses, sawdust, and pure stubbornness. But this is different. This gentleman is Dr. John Gorey, a Florida physician with a contraption he claims can make ice without a lake, a pond, or even winter. Just air, water, and compression. At first you laugh, like really laugh. Artificial ice, a refrigerator made of tubes and ammonia and God knows what. You've built a frozen empire on the laws of nature, on frost and harvest and geography. If cold can be manufactured, what even is your moat? But then you stop laughing, because he shows you results. A tiny block, slow to melt, humming quietly on his table like a threat in miniature. It's crude, sure, inefficient, expensive, but it's real. And suddenly you're staring down a truth you never wanted to face. Winter isn't a monopoly anymore. This isn't an overnight shift. Most people still don't trust artificial ice. It smells weird. It tastes metallic. It comes from machines, not crystal lakes. Plus, it's wildly impractical, costing more per pound than even your longest shipments. You tell yourself it's a novelty, but deep down you feel it. The chill creeping in isn't from your storage houses. It's the future. By the late 1850s, the whispers begin growing louder. Breweries start experimenting with mechanical cooling. Meatpackers in Chicago install massive ice machines powered by steam. And in New Orleans, where once your ice houses stood uncontested, a hotel installs its very own ice maker. You don't lose sleep yet, but the world is changing. Fast. You start doing what every savvy entrepreneur does when disruption looms. You watch. You write letters to engineers. You invite tinkerers to your warehouses. You don't fight the future, yet you study it. One entry in your journal reads, "Should a machine produce cold more cheaply, our trade must evolve or perish." Today, business schools teach this as the Tudor pivot dilemma. You weren't Kodak. You saw the change coming. But whether you acted on it fast enough, well, the jury's still out. In the meantime, you're still expanding. Your ice still floods ports from Bombay to Rio, from Charleston to Singapore. Your blocks are still cheaper than machine-made ice, still trusted, still desired. And ironically, your network, those decades of warehouses, shipping lines, and dealer contracts are what buy you time. No inventor can replicate that overnight, but they don't have to. All they need is scale. One big machine, one smart company, and suddenly what you spent a lifetime building could be replaced in an instant. Academic circles today still argue over whether you should have poured money into Gory's technology. Some say you could have owned both empires, natural and artificial. Others say no, that your greatest strength was also your blind spot. You believed in nature. You believed in winter. You built a philosophy around it. Because ice to you wasn't just cold, it was earned. It was something you harvested by moonlight, carved by hand, and loaded with care. Ice was a gift from the season. And these machines, they were shortcuts. Imitations. Soulless hums against the poetry of a frozen lake. Still, one night, as you walk past your warehouse and hear the muffled rattle of a new compressor engine in the distance, you pause and admit it. It's coming. Not today, not tomorrow. But eventually, the Ice King will face a new kind of winter. The summer of 1860 sizzles its way across New York City like a bad joke with no punchline. The streets stink of horse sweat and hot garbage, tempers boil, and the one thing keeping this massive urban stew from total meltdown? Ice. Your ice. But lately, things have gotten complicated. You're no longer alone in this game. The Knickerbocker Ice Company has risen fast and loud. Backed by deep-pocketed investors and outfitted with steam-powered cutters, they harvest from the Hudson River like it's their birthright. And they're not playing nice. They muscle into your accounts, undercut your pricing, build bigger warehouses. Soon, they've secured exclusive contracts with bars, hospitals, and even, oh, the betrayal, the US Navy. Worse, they're copying your entire model. Harvest in winter, store in insulated depots, distribute through their own branded wagons. You see your empire reflected in theirs, except with more money, more lawyers, and more ruthlessness. This isn't competition anymore. It's war. Welcome to the Ice Trust era. A time when companies freeze out smaller rivals, form secret cartels, and jack up prices once they have cornered the market. Sound familiar? Yeah. It's the 19th century version of big tech. Knickerbocker and a few others begin coordinating to control supply, and thus, control price. They call it managing the harvest. The public calls it a monopoly. And you? You grit your teeth and fight dirty when you have to. You leverage your older contracts. You lower prices to unsustainable levels just to hold territory. You even quietly buy shares in smaller competitors to keep the trust from swallowing them whole. For a while, it works. But there's a dark irony here. The more the industry grows, the more it eats itself. The demand is endless. Ice cools homes, preserves food, saves lives. By now, hospitals rely on it for surgeries. Morgues can't function without it. Milk spoils in hours without it. In many cities, it's not a luxury anymore. It's a public utility. So when Knickerbocker and the other big players start manipulating prices, people revolt. Newspaper headlines scream, "The ice famine, price-fixing scandal chills New York." In one famous summer, the price of ice doubles in under a week. Poor families can't afford it. Infant deaths spike. Politicians start sniffing around, and reformers call for a municipal ice supply, an early whisper of socialism that sends businessmen into a cold sweat. You're caught in the middle. On one hand, you're a capitalist. You believe in the hustle, the grind, the market. On the other, You remember those early days in Boston, cutting frozen lake water for no pay, just hope. You didn't build this to gouge people. You built it because everyone deserves a little winter, even in July. And now you're watching your legacy turn into something bloated and cruel. Academics still debate this part of ice history. Some say the ice trust was a necessary evil, a way to scale distribution in rapidly growing cities. Others call it the first great corporate overreach of modern America. But either way, the end result is clear. Public trust in the ice industry begins to crack. The government sniffs regulation. Unions form among ice cart drivers. And you, the man who started it all with a handsaw and a dream, are left wondering, did I build an empire or unleash a glacier that will bury me? Because somewhere behind the steam and sawdust, behind the trust meetings and merger rumors, something else is stirring. A hum. Mechanical, artificial, and inevitable. It's a muggy afternoon in Massachusetts, and you're sitting by the edge of Fresh Pond again, the place where it all started. You reach down, scoop a handful of clear lake water, and watch it trickle through your fingers. It's 1862 now. The Civil War rages in the South, but in the North, a different kind of battle is brewing between tradition and technology. Because you are hearing it everywhere, that hum again. Not just one machine, dozens. Ice-making devices clunking to life in breweries, meat-packing plants, and even private clubs. Some run on ammonia, others on compressed air. Most leak, sputter, or explode in early prototypes. But they're getting better fast. A German engineer has just patented a system that can produce solid ice blocks with consistency. A guy in Australia is shipping artificial ice to India now. You blink. India? That was your crown jewel. But now, a machine can do in 12 hours what once took your men a week, a frozen lake, and a team of horses. You walk back to your office and run the numbers. Again. Natural ice is still cheaper for now. Your sawdust methods are refined, your shipping routes efficient, your seasonal workforce experienced. You've even improved your block cutting grids again. No one can touch your quality. But here's the catch. Machines don't need seasons. They don't care if the winter's too warm, or if the lake doesn't freeze thick enough, or if the harvest was late. They don't rely on nature's rhythm, and that scares you. Because for the first time in your life, you realize nature is not your partner, it's your bottleneck. You've always embraced it, made peace with its chaos. But these machines, they've cut nature clean out of the equation. And with it, the romance of the business. You visit one of these early mechanical ice factories in Brooklyn. The air inside is sharp, chemical, metallic. A worker shovels crushed ice into barrels like he's loading coal. There's no lake, no smell of pine, no poetry. You nod politely, shake hands. But inside, something turns. You can't deny it. This is the future. But man, it's ugly. And yet, the business world doesn't care. They're not after poetry, they're after scale. Suddenly, everyone's talking about year-round availability, urban cooling, on-site freezing. Hotels want their own machines. Meat distributors demand consistent temperature controls. You hear whispers that rail cars may one day refrigerate themselves. You still have something they don't. Trust. Your brand still means something. Tudor Ice still gets requests from Havana to Bombay. The name still evokes quality, natural purity, a kind of magic. But that's not forever. You know it. And you're tired. After 5 decades of building, hustling, failing, rebuilding, inventing, you're starting to feel the frost in your bones. You wonder, will they remember you when the machines take over? Will they know who built the routes? Who taught the world that cold could be a business? Business professors still debate this moment. Was Tudor's slow retreat from the industry a wise exit strategy or a missed opportunity to reinvent? Should he have bought the patents, built his own factory, or was the real genius in knowing when to step back? No one agrees, but one thing is certain: you changed the world. Because even as artificial ice begins to spread, people still ask for real ice, for lake ice, for your ice. And in that gap between nostalgia and innovation, you still have a foothold. At least for now. You wake before dawn to the creak of floorboards and the soft clink of harnesses outside. The year is 1870. Another harvest begins. Outside your window, teams of men bundled in wool and leather march across the frozen surface of Spy Pond. The tools are sharper now, the patterns more precise. The entire operation moves like choreography, horse-drawn cutters tracing perfect lines across the ice like they're laying bricks for a cathedral. And you're watching it like a ghost. By now, you've stepped back from the day-to-day. Your name's still on the crates, still spoken in Havana, Bombay, New Orleans. But behind the scenes, your managers are making more of the calls. Your empire, once a handful of desperate gambles, is now a sprawling machine of its own. And still, you can't let go. Because this harvest, this cold light, this crack and groan of ice beneath horseshoes, this is who you are. You walk down to the shore. The foreman tips his cap. Some of the younger workers don't even recognize you. One squints and whispers, "Is that?" Doesn't matter. You kneel beside a block, run your glove along its glassy top and knock it once. Clear, solid, singing. The world may be changing, but this is perfect. Except, of course, the world is changing. Faster than ever. Refrigerated rail cars are becoming real. The meat industry's been revolutionized. Some urban homes now have tiny, noisy compressors tucked under their kitchen counters. They call them refrigerators. You grimace at the word. It sounds like cheating. You receive letters now, full of concern and optimism both. One from Bombay. "Sir, your ice remains preferred, but locals experiment with machines. Their consistency is unsettling." One from Charleston. "Tudor blocks now compete with artificial slabs, cheaper but with a faint chemical odor." And one from a small startup in Chicago, asking if you consider licensing your distribution model for non-lake ice. You laugh, then stop, because maybe that's not a terrible idea. Academics today argue whether you should have made that pivot. Some say licensing your cold chain empire to artificial ice producers could have prolonged your reign by decades, but others insist Tudor's genius wasn't in the tech, it was in the belief. You believed cold could travel, you believed people could change their expectations, and you didn't wait for demand. You shipped it. Back on the lake, a young boy hauls sawdust. He's no older than you were when this all began. He wipes his nose, squints against the light, and drags a sled full of freshly cut blocks toward the waiting sleighs. You catch your reflection in the ice, older now, but the same eyes. You built something strange and improbable, a business based on melting, a fortune carried in the belly of wooden ships, an empire with no land, only frost. And yet, it's real. The warehouses still stand. The names still echo. The drinks are still cold. For now. Because you feel it. The last winter harvests are near. Maybe not this year, maybe not the next. But the ponds are warming. The world is spinning faster. And the machines, they don't rest. You straighten your coat, tip your hat to no one in particular, and turn back toward the house. Behind you, the lake glitters, like memory. It's 1880, and you're a name now. Not a man. Not a presence on the docks. Not even someone they expect to see at the warehouses anymore. Just a name. stenciled on crates and faded on rusting iron signage. Tudor ice, like a relic from a cooler, slower world. You've retired to a quieter life just outside Boston. The ponds are still there. The harvest still happens. But now it's your nephews, agents, and employees running things. And honestly, you don't mind. You've spent over 70 years shipping winter into the tropics. You deserve to sit down once in a while. But even from your armchair, you can feel it in your bones. The natural ice era is melting. Your competitors, the ones who laughed when you shipped ice to Martinique, are mostly gone. Replaced not by better cutters or faster boats, but by engineers. Tinkerers. Men with lab coats instead of boots. They talk about vapor compression like it's scripture and call you pre-industrial. Rude. Ice machines are no longer fringe curiosities. They're real, efficient, and most damning of all, predictable. In Cincinnati, a meatpacking facility runs entirely on artificial refrigeration. In Texas, wealthy homes cool their pantries with small, in-house cooling boxes. The railroads begin adopting cold cars, and now beef, cheese, even flowers can cross the continent without your ice. But here's the plot twist the textbooks often miss. Even as mechanical refrigeration rises, the desire for natural ice doesn't die instantly. People still ask for it. They claim the lake ice tastes better, that it's clearer, less metallic. Bartenders in Havana insist drinks made with your cubes have better mouthfeel. Yes, they say mouthfeel. Even in the 1800s, people find ways to be pretentious. In fact, for a time, you become the artisanal option. Mechanical ice is fast, cheap, and abundant. But your ice has story, legacy, and romance. It carries the soul of New England winter. A small miracle chipped from a frozen lake, not born in a boiler room. It's ironic. After decades of being the disruptor, you become the nostalgia act. But it doesn't save the business. By the late 1880s, the handwriting's on the wall, and it's spelled Freon. Machines become safer, quieter, more compact. Wealthy urban homes install ice machines in their basements. Restaurants no longer need to wait for your boats. And the final blow? Hotels stop ordering in bulk. Why wait for a shipment when you can make ice on demand right in the cellar? You don't rage against it, not really. Because deep down, you knew this was coming. You didn't just ship cold, you introduced a need for it. And the moment that need existed, someone was going to build a faster way. You watch quietly as the warehouses shutter one by one. The sawdust piles shrink. The boats go back to freight or rot in dry dock. The lakes freeze each winter, but fewer men come to cut. The ice still forms. It just doesn't travel anymore. And in a twist that only history could write, the very systems you built, routes, contracts, seasonal planning, become blueprints for the cold chain logistics of the future. Today's global refrigeration networks, they owe you rent. There's a quote often misattributed to you, something about ice being the memory of winter. You probably didn't say it, but it sounds good, and people like putting it under your portrait. So you let it slide. Your time is ending. But your idea? Oh, it's everywhere now. It's a quiet morning in Boston, 1864. You've just turned 80. You sit near the window, wrapped in a wool blanket, staring out at the trees. It's late autumn, and the first skim of ice is just beginning to form on the birdbath outside. Thin, fleeting, but promising. Much like your life has been. A constant cycle of melt and rebuild. You don't make it out to the ponds anymore. Your knees argue with stairs. The docks are foreign territory now, run by men in bowler hats and ledgers printed on slicker, newer paper. They say things like vertical integration and scalable inputs. You say, "Where's my tea?" But still, every now and then, a crate goes out with your name on it. Still, in far-off places like Calcutta and Kingston, someone sips from a chilled glass and mutters, Ah, that's the good stuff, and that matters. Because ice, your ice, didn't just cool drinks. It reshaped what people expected of comfort. It redefined how perishables moved, how cities functioned, how medicine stored. It helped scale agriculture. It lowered summer mortality. And it set the stage for the mechanical revolution that would eventually make you obsolete, but also make you foundational. You once wrote, "I have staked everything on a belief that others cannot yet see." People called you mad, delusional, unemployable, and now you're in textbooks, case studies, late night trivia questions. But more than that, you're a cultural echo. Think about it. Every time someone pops an ice cube into a glass without thinking, every time a grocer wheels in frozen seafood, every time a machine hums behind a bar and spits out perfect squares of cold, they're living inside your legacy. They just don't know it. And isn't that the most honest kind of legacy? Not the statue, but the silence you created where discomfort used to live. You passed quietly in February of that same year. No fanfare, no parade. But the Boston papers run a small headline. Frederic Tudor, the Ice King, dies at 80. They say you brought snow to the equator, winter to the tropics, cold to commerce. They don't mention how many times you failed, how many nights you slept on an empty stomach with a full ledger, how often your empire balanced on a single crate of unmelted hope. But we remember, and here's the kicker, even after mechanical refrigeration takes over, it takes another 50 years before artificial ice truly replaces the last natural block in daily trade. Your idea was so bold, so stubborn, so perfectly timed. It refused to die. And now, you live in every refrigerator hum, in every frosted cocktail, in every quiet comfort we don't think to thank. Because you didn't just sell cold. You taught the world it didn't have to live in heat forever. The story's done now. You can feel it, like the cooling hush that follows a long summer thunderstorm, or the way a fan hums gently in the background as the last light fades from your room. Let it settle. You've walked through frozen fields, stood at the edge of empire, heard the crack of ice echo across oceans and decades, and now you're here. Still. Quiet. Breathing in the chill that one man dared to carve into the world. What started as frozen pond water became possibility, and what melted was never failure, only the proof that something once held together. Let that thought melt slow inside you. You don't have to remember every detail of the story. Just let the rhythm of it drift down into your bones, into sleep. Because while the blocks are gone, the feeling stays. That cool certainty that someone, somewhere, changed everything by believing the impossible. So close your eyes. The air is still. The night is kind. And the world, still humming with a little bit of winter.
you